What's up, guys? Welcome back to Newswave. So from time to time, we'll talk about the PlayStation 5 hacking scene as breakthroughs happen, but yesterday, a major exploit was revealed online that seems to be setting up that generational showdown between Sony and hackers. We'll go over that here today. Also, we are going to be talking about Halo Infinite and how it's becoming more and more likely that there is a massive shift happening behind the scenes when it comes to that slipspace engine. And we'll also be talking about a remaster that started to pop up in the news that I would like to see happen, but it's coming from Rockstar and they don't really make a lot of games anymore. Guys, if you enjoy these videos, make sure you hit that like button, helps out a ton. And if you're new here to the Spawnwave channel, make sure you subscribe down below. And we're gonna start today with Nintendo and one of the acquisitions they've made over the last year or two, which we've seen a lot of acquisitions happen, some massive ones like we saw with Microsoft and Bethesda, ZeniMax, or even Sony and Bungie and Microsoft trying to wrap up the deal with Activision Blizzard. But while all this is going on, Nintendo did pick up Dynamo Pictures. They then renamed them to Nintendo Pictures, and now we have a full website that's launched, which you can see here. And I think a lot of us were hoping that when a website went up, they would at least give us an idea as to what they're working on. But I guess the best line we have here is, we aim to have consumers around the world learn about Nintendo characters through video and to create unique videos that will remain in their memories forever. The best thing I can gather from this is it's Nintendo exploring ways to introduce their intellectual properties to people outside of just games. And that could mean that Nintendo Pictures works on a new animated show for F-Zero or Mario or Metroid or whoever. That, to me, is the most likely thing to come out of this. And I'm curious what intellectual property you would like to see Nintendo Pictures work on, whether it's going to the movie theater or maybe just going right into like Amazon Prime or HBO Max or Netflix. A lot of possibilities here, so let me know what you'd like to see. Also, ever since the Steam Deck released, we've seen it continue to gain popularity online, and now it looks like we have our first real indication of sales figures for the handheld. We can see this posted up over on Gaming on Linux, saying KDA devs talk Steam Deck and their work for it at Academy 2022. Over 1 million Steam Decks have shipped, which is very good. I know we hear about tens of millions, 100 some odd million for the Switch. So you look at that and you say 1 million doesn't feel like a lot. But you have to remember, the Steam Deck is in limited supply. It's to the point where you get an IOU and then sometimes you have to wait up to a year, which was mostly from launch. It's gotten a lot better now to where it's down to a month or two to get your Steam Deck, but it's not available on Target or Walmart, Best Buy, GameStop's websites, and it's certainly not in stores. This is all something that goes through Valve's website or the Steam client. As they get closer and closer to that window shrinking and just being gone completely, I am curious what will happen with sales figures if they can get them into Best Buys and other retail establishments. Either way, though, this is, I think, the most successful thing we've seen from Valve when it comes to hardware, especially from the system side, because the Steam machines were just a disaster. The Steam Deck, much more focused here, reaching 1 million units now, to me, says that Valve is going to look to continue to iterate on this hardware going forward. So exciting stuff there when it comes to the PC handheld scene. Oh, and it does indeed look like the 2016 Game of the Year has officially shut down. We can see this posted up by Nebellion over on Twitter. Overwatch 1 is officially a dead game. This tweet, by the way, went viral, exploded online immediately because, yeah, Overwatch 1 is shut down. Obviously, Overwatch 2 is out today, and the idea is they're shutting down their servers, being Blizzard, so they can then really move people over to Overwatch 2, so they don't have to try to hold up or support two different games. I might try out Overwatch 2. It's free to play, so it's like, I guess, why not? But I'm not really a big hero shooter person, but I am curious about these games when they launch at first, and then I can kind of go from there. But yeah, interesting stuff, though, to see Overwatch 1 just get completely wiped off the face of the earth. And guys, with some of the quick news out of the way, let's get into the bigger stuff. Let's start right away with this major PlayStation 5 exploit. We've seen Sony have to wrestle with hackers in the past, most notably with the PSP. That got really out of control for them. But now it appears we're getting some momentum on the PlayStation 5 with this latest exploit. We can see this posted up over on Wolo.net, where they say released PS5 kernel exploit plus WebKit vulnerability for firmware 4.03. They say this release relies on the WebKit vulnerability as an entry point, meaning it will work on any PS5. That includes the digital PS5. I think the reason they're mentioning that is because we've had an exploit in the past that used the Blu-ray drive. In this case, it'll work on any version of the PS5 there, but it will need to be running firmware 4.03, which is probably kind of rare right now. That is an older firmware for the PS5, so you'd have to be fortunate, I guess, just have a sealed PS5 from launch or in like the first year or so. Currently, this exploit is not compatible with anything above 4.03. And they say not at this time. Let's face it, as more and more momentum picks up around the PS5 hacking scene, especially with a WebKit exploit like this, yeah, you could see more and more vulnerabilities discovered as we go along here. It is worth noting, though, this is a fairly limited exploit. As they mention here, the exploit achieves read and write, but not code execution. They do have an entire step-by-step guide on how to do this, and some were showing it off on Twitter, like Lance McDonald here, with an entire video going over the PlayStation 5 being jailbroken. So interesting stuff to see all of that. And the biggest thing for Sony, and the part they're obviously going to be keeping an eye on here, is how will this affect publishers and developers on their platform. It's one thing if it's some old firmware and most people don't have access to it. It's another thing if they catch up to the firmware that Sony has, like we saw with that PSP, and they have to consistently do these stability updates that really is all about trying to improve the firmware and patch vulnerabilities. Because with the PSP, we would have those patches go out, and then hours later, a day at the most, we would see a new custom firmware version come out that would just match it, and you'd be fine. You just update to that and you're good to go. The PSP will still be completely hacked and be able to run homebrew. So in this case, Sony is just going to be keeping an eye on this, I'm sure, to make sure things don't spiral out of control for them. Especially if we look at something like the Switch, where the first 20 to 25 million systems were very easy to hack and run unsigned code on. You just needed a paperclip and a way to push a payload to the Switch through USB, and that was sort of it. We see games leak out ahead of time online, and people with hacked Switches will be playing it up to a week before the game hits retail. So that was clearly a problem for Nintendo to where it's basically been admitted through documentation they changed the chipset out completely just to be able to circumvent that hack. So I don't think the PS5 is set up in that way to where it's as devastating as a paperclip touching a couple pins on the Switch, but they understand that if things get out of control here, it could affect the PS5 in the long run. So I don't know if they will be able to run up to where the PS5 is currently in terms of firmware anytime soon, but who knows, 4 or 5 years from now, it could get to that point. MVG, I'm sure, will make an entire video around this situation, as he's much more knowledgeable when it comes to the homebrew and hacking scene here, but certainly an interesting development and something to keep an eye on for the PS5 going forward. Next up, let's talk about Halo Infinite, which is a game that's struggled to put out consistent updates. We're currently in a season that's going to stretch into 2023 and be about 10 months long, and a lot of this is because Halo Infinite and 343 can't seem to hit any of the dates on their roadmaps. They just continue to have to delay them. There are a few reasons for this. We assume management, and then also the slipspace engine. It's brought up quite a bit because it's a proprietary engine that was developed seemingly just for Halo Infinite, but we've heard that it's not exactly the most documented and well-known engine. But we are now hearing rumblings of a massive shift from slipspace to Unreal Engine 5. And I saw some of these claims and it was hard for me to believe because that sounds like a massive undertaking, and then you'd be moving away from the engine that you spent years creating for this one game. The original claims came from Sean W. They posted on Twitter, and some wrote him off pretty quickly, but now, as people have been able to look into this, seem to be backing up these claims. For example, over on Windows Central, we have Jez Gordon, who did a good article pulling a lot of this information together. I'll link it down below for you to read through a bit more. Says that Halo may be gearing up for a wider switch to the Unreal Engine, known for games like Gears of War, Fortnite, many others. Sean W.'s report was also corroborated by ACG, that being over on Twitter, as well as Jez's own sources. Now, a lot of this comes back to that Battle Royale mode that's being created by Certain Affinity, and that's codenamed Tatanka. Jez Corden's talked about this mode at length, and it seems like it would have Forge integration, which is one of the reasons that you would go, okay, well, if it's going to have Forge integration, which is being built currently for Halo Infinite with that Slipspace engine, you would assume that this Battle Royale mode would also be on the Slipspace engine. But because this engine is so difficult to work with, mostly because there's not a lot of documentation around it apparently, you're going to have a harder time getting people in the door to then start immediately working on updates for this game, because they'd have to learn the engine that it's built on. Whereas, yes, if you were on something that's more widely known, like Unreal Engine, it'd be a bit quicker to get people in the door and then start working on updates for a game that really needs updates. Now, I am curious what kind of undertaking that would be to move Halo Infinite to Unreal Engine 5. At this time, it's mostly being talked about as just Tatanka being built on Unreal Engine 5, and I guess there would be compatibility between that and Slipspace, although the way I'm kind of picturing it is it essentially would launch from Halo Infinite into this Battle Royale mode, similar to, I guess, Call of Duty, where that'll launch into Warzone if you pick it on the menu. I guess that's a way they could tie it together, but Forge, which seems like a ridiculous tool right now based on some of the things I'm seeing people make, would also be compatible with Tatanka. There's a lot of question marks here, but we see Bonnie Ross move on from 343. We also see the person who led development on the Slipspace engine part ways from Microsoft. There's still, I think, a pending story around how all of that happened, which I'm sure will see the light of day sometime soon. It does seem like there is a lot of stuff happening in the background, maybe to shift away from the original vision of Halo Infinite. Yeah, that would include that Slipspace engine. So very interested to see how this continues to develop. It still seems like something that'll take years to come to fruition here, because I have to imagine going from the Slipspace engine to Unreal would take a little while to do and then also settle in and get used to, but hopefully this means a better future for Halo Infinite. Next up, let's talk about the PlayStation VR 2 that I'm expecting an announcement for, with release date and price anytime now. We have a new report out of Bloomberg from Takashi Machizuki going over some of the production that's happening right now. We can see this posted up on Twitter. It says, Sony facing no production and logistics issues in making PSVR 2, and availability of PS5 should also improve drastically towards the end of this year. So obviously that's good news for the PS5. People who have been looking for one of these systems without paying a scalper's premium of like hundreds of dollars, hopefully should be able to find it at retail during the holiday season. With the PSVR 2 in mind, it appears Sony plans to make 2 million units of this headset by March of next year. I believe the PSVR 1 sold around 5 million units all the way around, all said and done. That means that 2 million headsets for the PSVR 2, if Sony can sell through those by mid next year, I mean, they'd be almost to the halfway mark of what the PSVR 1 did in just a matter of months. I assume this headset is going to release February or March of next year, and it should be a pretty big release for Sony just because there is still a high demand for the PlayStation 5, so you can at least count on scalpers be buying up the PSVR 2. I'm very curious about the pricing for this headset. I think it's going to be a lot. We see the Oculus Quest 2, which, by the way, the Meta Quest 2, that is like the benchmark right now for VR headsets. It's sold far and away the most, and it's now priced fairly high when you consider the experiences you're getting from that versus what you would get from the Valve Index, or in this case, the PSVR 2. And Sony is looking to have roughly 20 or so titles ready to go at launch. So I'm thinking, I'll say it now, the PSVR 2 probably getting unveiled in a blog post with a trailer to go alongside of it. I don't think it'll be in any kind of showcase. I'm thinking it's gonna be $550 to $600. Yeah, it's not going to be cheap, so hopefully the experiences are there to impress and it ends up being worth it. And in our last bit of news, let's talk about a remaster that I would love to see happen, and because of that, it probably won't, and that is Midnight Club LA. I saw this pop up online. I couldn't believe it. It was a few days ago. I kind of just let it sit for a bit, and I was like, you know what? let's talk about it because a lot of people were messaging me around this topic, and this is where it's coming from. We can see this posted up by Rebs Gaming. It appears that Rockstar Games is remastering Midnight Club Los Angeles. Started getting passed around quite a bit on Twitter. It comes from Super Type 1, who did some digging around Midnight Club and found this quote here from Marcus, who is a musical artist who licensed music, a track, for the game Midnight Club Los Angeles, again saying they will use it for the official trailer and in-game music for the remastered Midnight Club LA on next-gen consoles. Now, the funny thing about that is this wouldn't be the first time that we've had a musical artist leak a game's existence. It happened with Tony Hawk Pro Skater 1 and 2, if I'm not mistaken, and even there, different skateboarders just leaked out that it existed too. So this, not necessarily uncommon. The only issue here is this post that was made, specifically the one I believe was on Instagram, was from a year ago. Now, that could kind of line up because if you remember, 6 or 7 months ago, Take-Two did mention Midnight Club for some weird reason in their investors briefing, and that caught a lot of people's eyes. Like, are you guys gonna do another Midnight Club? I mean, if they want to do a remaster of LA, I'm perfectly fine with that. That's a very good game. It had a weird thing happen on digital stores where it disappeared and then it came back again for some reason and it disappeared, then it came back. It's been all over the map with this game. I think a remaster would be really cool to see. I've mentioned though, Rockstar doesn't really do a lot of games anymore. They're clearly focused right now on GTA 6, but hey, maybe this is something they, I don't know, outsourced to someone else to remaster, or maybe it's something they've been working on prior to GTA 6 going like full on production. That's all I can imagine here, and I'm hoping this is actually a thing because Midnight Club, I believe, is a series that could absolutely make a comeback and thrive right now, but it's really up to Take-Two and Rockstar if they want to make it happen. And before we go to the comment of the day, we're going to take a look at the poll that I posted up yesterday, where I ask, have you played a Midnight Club racing game before? Look at this. 45% said yes, I've played at least one. 48% said no, I've never played Midnight Club. Now, that could be because you're just not interested in racing games, but I also realize Midnight Club LA came out in, was that 2008 or so? I've played it somewhat recently, use a Sidekick cell phone to message people, so it's been a while since Midnight Club had a new entry. And if you go back before LA, Midnight Club 3 Dub Edition on the PS2 was an incredible racing game. So I would love to see the series come back in some way, even if it is just a remaster of LA, sure, but a brand new Midnight Club now would be awesome. So come on, Rockstar, come on, Take-Two. Let's get this series back up and running. And we'll finish up with the comment of the day, as you're seeing here. This is from Rabowski saying, everyone, ask for a Bloodborne remake, remaster, PC port. Sony, Horizon, take it or leave it. There has to be something going on with Bloodborne in the sense that it's so obvious for all of us that this game, if Sony announced a remaster or remake, would explode online. PC port, same deal. So that leads me to believe that there is something going on behind the scenes, publishing-wise, rights holders. I don't know. It has to be tripping this whole thing up and people can't come to terms with it. It's weird that this hasn't happened yet, especially when we see stuff like Last of Us Part 1 and Horizon Zero Dawn Remaster. It's like Bloodborne is right there. But also, I mean, Resistance is right there, Infamous is right there, Killzone's right there. There's a lot of things they could do in general outside of just Horizon Zero Dawn. And ladies and gentlemen, that's going to do it here for Newswave. If you enjoyed this video, guys, hit that like button. If not, hit the dislike. Leave comments down below about everything we talked about here. Today was the idea that Halo Infinite could move from Slipspace Engine over to Unreal Engine 5. Do you think that would be a good idea and could help the series in the long run? And then also, what about this big PS5 exploit? Do you think Sony has anything to worry about here going forward? And then Midnight Club. Did you play it back on the PS2 or maybe even Midnight Club LA? Would you like to see a remaster of that happen at some point? Thanks guys for watching, and I'll see you next time.